Hello.
Hey, Jeff. Um, all right, good to see you again. Hey,
Oh,
everyone. We're about to get started. Let me just quickly set up right here. Thank you for joining us on our second session today of a busy Thursday doubleheader. Today on Lens with Advanced Design, we have our next guest is Jeff Staple, a creative visionary with work that encompasses graphic design, fashion design, footwear, brand, and marketing. Jeff founded Staple Design Studio Inc. in 1997 and has worked on creative projects with partners that include Adidas, Burton, ESPN, HBO, Kia Motors, Levi, Microsoft, Nike, and a variety of other brands. So we're very excited to have Jeff here, and he can talk more about his background and all the amazing work that he does with his collaborators. So I'm going to give things over to Jeff. Jeff, thank you so much for being here.
for sure. Thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely. And maybe we can just kick things off by talking a little bit about your background and how you got started in this industry that you're in, because you actually went to school for journalism at
hmm
NYU, and then you shifted over to design. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So that's right. I went to New York University first. So I had the sort of pleasure of experiencing both like a liberal art school and then compared to a traditional art school in Parsons School of Design. And I grew up. I'm Chinese. My parents are immigrants. They're from China and Hong Kong. They pretty much came here specifically so that they can have like the first passport bearing US citizen person in their whole entire family clan. And it was my duty and destiny to go to a good school, be really good at piano, be really good at math, get a 4.0 GPA, get a 1600 or whatever the high score is on the SAT, and become like a doctor or a lawyer. That was my
Sure.
preordained path. And it didn't work out that way. Right from the get, academically, I wasn't that academically smart. I didn't perform well in school. I was sort of very middle of the road. Like my GPA was like 2.0, like my SAT score ended up being like 1,000 instead of like, so I got like halfway. I remember in high school, they have like your student ranking of where you are in the ranking. I was like, out of 1,600 kids, I was literally number 800. Like I was like the most middle of the road
You were halfway
person.
there.
Yeah. I managed to squeak into NYU. I kind of knew I wanted to be in New York University from even middle school. I just loved the energy of New York ever since I was a kid. My parents had they imported, exported like fortune cookies and soy sauce. So they had like a warehouse business in Chinatown in New York City. And so I would always go there and hang out. And I always loved the energy. So I always knew I wanted to go to NYU. Managed to squeak in, like I said. NYU, when I applied in 1992, was kind of like an average school. And lucky for me, after I got in 93, they really pushed to become they actually made a push to become Ivy League. They're not Ivy League, but they like just kind of bought their way into it. Like they got a massive library, like the best teachers, the best technology, and they really gunned for this Ivy League status. So like sort of towards the tail end of my time at NYU, people were like, wow, you go to NYU. And it's like, I got in with a 2.0 GPA, and like barely got in. But while I was at NYU, I took journalism. I was really into writing, and being like a creative writer or like an author wasn't really like an option to tell my parents that I wanted to do that. But journalism, I thought, was like close to creative writing, but like money making potentially, and there was this newscaster back in the day. For those of you watching who live on the East Coast, you'll know Connie Chung from back in the day. And she was like the one Asian face that was on television besides Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan. And so, when I said journalism, my dad, I remember he was like, "Oh, like Connie Chung, great! Like that's a job. Like there's like one journalist, Asian journalist in all of television, and he's like, that's a job, And quite honestly, being in the creative arts, even to me, wasn't an option. Like there was no possibility that somebody could make money drawing and doodling and sketching, which I enjoy doing, but it was never like this could potentially be a job. So journalism it was. I did that for 2 years. And then I've been working since I was 13 years old. So like having a job, a paying hourly job throughout my life has always been like a norm. The first job I ever had was developing film at a 1-hour photo lab. If anyone remembers what that is, but people used to drop off negatives and someone would have to process it. And that was me. So I was like inhaling these chemicals from a very young age. And from there it was like bussing tables at a Chinese restaurant, delivering pizzas. I fucking rewound videotapes at a video store. Like if anyone remembers what renting VCR tapes was, if you didn't rewind the tape, you get penalized. They hired me just to rewind VHS tapes. That was my only job. Delivered pizzas, swept hair at a hair salon, like just random shit. And so when I went to NYU, I continued doing random shit. Like I worked at one of the most infamous, reputable sporting goods stores in New York City called Paragon Sporting Goods, which is still there. It's like a sort of an OG institution. Worked there, sold sneakers, sold skates, just a bunch of odd jobs. And one of the odd jobs I took was a data entry clerk job. And it was really good paying. It was like $12 an hour, which back then was like damn good. Back then the minimum wage was literally probably like 6. So like 12 was really good. And so I got a job at this data entry position, and it was in like a graphic design firm, And so that was the first time that I observed people doing creativity, and they all had jobs, and my mind was sort of blown. I didn't know that existed before that, as I said. And as the owner of that company sort of took me under his wing and started teaching me Quarkxpress, if you guys remember that. I'm super dating myself in this talk right now. Like people are going to be like, damn, how's this dude still even alive? Quarkxpress is like pre-Adobe InDesign, for those who don't know. So he taught me Quark, Photoshop, Illustrator. I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the idea that like you can translate these ideas in your head into more so like information design, and like you could use it as a platform. And I was like super interested in that. I was always a fan of like you probably know that I'm like a big sneakerhead, but I've always been like really in love with like the advertising campaigns of sneaker culture, like the Just Do It campaign and the NYC campaigns. So being able to sort of take imagery or ideas or products and then translate them to like design was very, very intriguing to me. And I wanted to take that at NYU. And at the time, NYU didn't offer any design courses at all. They now have a decent design program. But for those who don't know, in New York City, NYU is only about 10 blocks away from Parsons School of Design. And Parsons is like one of the top design schools in the world. And so I, on a whim, applied for Parsons, managed to get in by the skin of my teeth with really no portfolio whatsoever, just sketches from when I was in middle school, elementary school, high school, just like comic book sketches, weird stuff. Other kids, they have these beautiful laminated portfolios and shit. And I like literally just brought like FedEx envelope. I would just take FedEx envelopes and put my papers in there, and I just like spread them out and managed to squeak into foundation program. And so I dropped out of NYU. There weren't any credits that really transferred from NYU to Parsons. So I had to redo foundation all over again at Parsons. So it was like a wasted 2 years at NYU. And then, went to Parsons. And that's a very long-winded answer to your question.
So you went to Parsons, and you went there specifically for graphic design, right?
Yeah, it was called communication design.
Okay,
yep.
Gotcha.
A glorified word for graphic design.
Sure, yeah. So Parsons, I mean, looking back from your time at Parsons to design now, how do you think design has shifted since you were at Parsons?
That's a great question. I think back then, and we're talking about like the early 2000s, right? Like graphic design was like a profession where it was like a very level playing field. And if you wanted to get a job as a graphic designer, you were judged purely on your portfolio, right? So the way you got jobs was you submitted your book, and, you know, the person who was in charge of the hiring, the creative director or whatever, would look at everyone's portfolio, would have no idea whose portfolio belonged to who, and they would just judge you on your work. And then they would call you back and you would get the job and you would get an hourly rate. It was sort of like very production style, you know what I mean? Like there weren't really like graphic design stars. It was like, there was like 5 of them in the whole world. There was like Paula Scher, Chip Kidd, David Carson. These were like, you know, Tibor Kalman. These were like the stars, but there were literally like less than 10 of them, you know? And everyone else was essentially one step above like the guy who works at Kinko's. like actually you could take your stuff to Kinko's and get it designed.
Yeah.
You know, and most clients, most companies saw you as a 4-year graphic design, you know, graduate, and the guy at Kinko's like, well, you know, like, oh, my kid knows Microsoft Word. I can have my kid. You hear that all the time, you know, like, oh, I know fonts. It's like, okay, good. So yeah, so that's how it was back then. It was very much like you were just judged on your work. And I think what's happened now is, I mean, it's night and day. Like we hire designers all the time. First of all, there is no book. There's no longer a portfolio, right? There's no book that you send out to someone. So now what is it? It transitioned from book to website. So now your work is on a website, but then it quickly transitioned now to social media, where now you just check out someone's Instagram page to see what their vibe and style is like, right? But typically by checking out someone's social media, you're also looking at their whole life. Like you're looking at everything else, who they date, who they broke up with, you know, like how many followers they have, what your engagement is, how many comments on your work. And so now it's not just about, oh, this is a great designer. It's like, wow, this person really engages with their audience well. Wow, they're really well spoken. Wow, they look good in front of a camera. Wow, look at how many IG lives they do, you know, like, and it's all these things that have nothing to do with graphic design, the skill of graphic design. So it's much more now about the entire persona of who you are. And hey, I gotta say, as a person who is now on the hiring side, if I see 2 bodies of work, right, and they're almost equal, like they're both equally skilled, and one body of work has 20 followers on Instagram and one has 2,000, and they cost the same to me, you can't blame them for going with the 2,000 person, because then you're at least like, oh, they have more visibility. When they post about the work, more people will see it. It's only a plus, you know, typically, right? So that's kind of the age that we live in now, and it's for better or for worse, because, you know, unfortunately, there's a lot of great designers out there that don't have the skill set to promote themselves and market themselves well, which is not something they teach you in design school. You know, they teach you how to be good graphic designers. And they're sort of struggling because they're not able to get out and like speak on their own work, you know. I guess, you know, they do, you remember in design school, they have like critique sessions, right? Where they teach you how to critique to your class. And so you have to speak intelligently and articulately about your work to 20, 30 other people. It's the same thing, but you have to be good at it now to like tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people, you know, which is like a different skill set.
Yeah, I mean, it has been a very interesting times now with social media, especially now with everyone staying and working from home. I feel like social media is a platform where everyone goes to either be inspired or to look for someone, like you said, to possibly employ. So it is a very, very interesting time how things have shifted in design. And myself, as a design educator, how do you think maybe I should start teaching my students to prepare for this new reality that we have?
Well, there's like, you know, a couple of classes that I really wish I did have. One is like sort of a public speaking presentation kind of class, you know, learning how to, like I just said, like articulate and like present yourself. I think that's super important. You know, there's this saying that I heard that always sticks with me. And it goes something like, you know, Pablo Picasso, he had a friend who was actually like a better artist than Picasso was, but he wasn't able to get off the couch. So nobody knows who he is. You know, like it doesn't matter that you're great. Like you have to get off the couch and somehow tell people that you're great. nowadays. You have to get above the noise. There's like a lot of noise of like, I'm great, I'm connected, you know, but you have to somehow get above that. And I'm not downplaying the need to be a great designer. Like, because once you make enough noise and get noticed, you have to deliver. You can't be like a charlatan and like get work and then fuck up the job or suck. You will not get repeated work, you know? So you have to be good, but the promotion is really key. So I think one class would be like a promotional sort of like presentation class, you know. In our company, we're going to start actually like doing like presentation coaching, like speaking coaching as one of like the added benefits of someone who works for Staple. So that when we present to clients and when we present amongst each other and when we do press and interviews, we just have like this sort of like presence and confidence, you know? So that's one. And then I think the other one is a finance class. You know, there's always this like, kind of like a church and state of like, are you a finance guy? Or are you an artistic guy? You know, and I think for too long, it's been assumed that if you're really good at creativity, you suck at balancing your money and like handling profits and losses and stuff. And that excuse just won't cut it anymore. Like nowadays, if you want to be a successful creative, you have to be able to handle your money really well. And so, you know, you go to a really great art school, and unfortunately that whole sector is completely lacking, you know? So like, I would love to learn how to like, how do you start a studio? What kind of financing do you need? How much money does it cost? What's, you know, do I need a COO? Do I need legal? Do I need to trademark? Like all of these little things that they don't teach you in art school, unfortunately. And I learned them the hard way. And a lot of my artist friends learned it the hard way. Usually the way a creative learns about law and finance is by getting sued or getting bootlegged, right? Like you see it all the time. That's how creatives learn about, like, oh, someone like Urban Outfitters bootlegged me. Yeah, you have to trademark your shit. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's too late then, you know?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I don't think there's a lot of, especially with the whole financial thing, there's no really classes that really teach you or prepare you for when you go out in the field as an artist or a creative to really start your own firm or your own studio. The legality of it, the taxes, the how to get incorporated on a federal, you know, level and also on a state level. And there's a lot of things that really go into that. And like you said, it usually takes you being in a situation to really figure things out and learn from that. But that's very interesting.
Yeah, I was
You know,
I was fortunate because you know, I have two companies, right? I have a design studio and I have a clothing line, and clothing collections are like more no joke. Like they're more serious because mainly because there's a lot of liability that happens with clothing. Like someone could like either gets, you know, you could either accidentally bootleg someone or infringe on someone's marks on clothing. You could also, like, God forbid, you know, set someone on fire with clothing. Like, you know, you could use the wrong fabric and like flammable. Like, so there's a lot more liability in clothing. So because I had a clothing line really early on, like I had to learn the difference between a sole proprietorship, an S class, an S class corporation, a C class corporation, an LLP, you know, like an Inc. These are all different ways of doing business. I have friends who are designers that have been designers for 20 years that still are not incorporated. They're still like, people are just writing personal checks to their names, which is, it's cool, but it's like they've also been, in my opinion, like dodging bullets for the last 20 years, you know, because they're really exposing themselves personally. And they never once talked about this stuff in Parsons, like about protecting your IP and your like intellectual property, and you like, you know, separate your social security number from an EIN tax ID number. Like I learned that on the street, like on my own, because like my friend was like, yo, you don't want someone to sue you when like their kid sets on fire, you know, like, so those are the things that I wish they taught us.
Absolutely. If they sue you and your company is connected to your social, you personally, your livelihood is pretty much over, right? So,
your house, your wife, your college, everything. Yeah.
Well, it's very interesting that you bring this up because you started out, you know, you were pretty young when you got a partnership with Nike. And then after that, you got a lot of these collaborations with all these really big companies. And I'm sure there was a lot of legality and business, you know, deals and all that stuff. And a lot of that stuff, did you also kind of learn it did you learn that as you went, or did you surround yourself with people that were knowledgeable in making these business deals?
No, I'm definitely one that learned trial by fire. So I'll give you an example. When a company like Nike is interested in working with you, you as a creative working on your own, you think you've crossed the finish line. Like the second Nike calls you and said, we want to work with you, like you're done. You haven't even done the work yet, but you're like, yes, I've made it. Like mission accomplished, goals, but like you haven't done anything. Okay. So now you negotiate your rate, which is another thing we could talk about, but then like, fine, the rate's negotiated. Nike's about to give you a 23-page document that is like the simplest independent contractor document. And so you as a creative, you just want to start working. You just want to get this deal done. So you have two choices now. You could look at this 20-page document and you could either pay a lawyer, cross all the T's, dot all the I's, redline it. That lawyer is also going to say, hey, point 4, this shouldn't be in here. You should call Nike and tell them to remove point 4. You're like, nah, I just want to fucking start working. Like, I'm not going to ruin this deal, And so you could either go that route, or you can say, which is what I did. I'd be like, this looks good to me. Like, I'm just going to sign this. This looks fine. I just want to get working with Nike, And that's honestly a mistake. It leaves you open for problems. But there's not a lot of creatives that have the foresight to say, let me drop $3,000, anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000 to like review a contract, redline it, send it back to Nike to change it, and hope that Nike doesn't say, you know what, we're going to call Joe Schmo because this is becoming a little annoying. I get that fear, and that fear still happens today, 20 years later. But I think protecting yourself is super important. Hindsight's 2020. You hear so many creatives say, like, I should have had a lawyer look at, like, that should be the number one quote of designers, I think, is said, is like, I should have had a lawyer look at it, because woulda, coulda, shoulda. Like, nobody thinks they need a lawyer beforehand, but unfortunately you do. And if you try to read these contracts by yourself, they are designed to give the person who wrote it the upper hand. Like, they're designed to protect the other party. And so it only behooves you to protect yourself in those cases. And I learned the hard way, not that Nike ever screwed me or anything, but, there were ways that I could have empowered myself better, negotiated better for myself. But I think it's fine, to be honest. Like, I think that is how you learn as a creative. The way you figure out how much your fees are, how much you can negotiate for, what your rider meaning like your minimum guarantee in terms of what you need. These are all things that, like, the only way to really learn them is to make mistakes, and realize, like, damn, I could have charged double for that job and still gotten it, unless you're like mad connected and like your sister is a Kardashian or some shit, like, you're going to have to hustle and grind, and I just realized that growing up, that was the only way that I was going to learn how to do it.
Absolutely. And I think it's really, really scary to be in a position where you do get contacted by Nike and you're like, I made it to the top of the mountain, but you haven't really shown them what you can bring to the table. Can you speak a little bit about that, as far as, like, I mean, that in itself, your story about even talking to Nike, it seems pretty overwhelming as a designer. Like, obviously I think everyone dreams that a really big company reaches out to them and say, hey, we want to collaborate with you. What are your tricks in the face of fear?
You mean like when you're meeting with somebody, right?
Yeah, like when a company like Adidas reaches out and like, I'm sure right now as we speak, you're probably pretty used to collaborating with a lot of these big companies. But when you started as a young designer, talking to Nike to start this collaboration, that must have been extremely, overwhelming.
Yeah, for sure. Early on, it's very nerve-wracking. If you're doing your job well, and I'm talking to all the people that are watching, if you're doing your job well as a creative, you're going to find yourself at tables that are very intimidating, and that means you're doing something right. And confidence comes with messing up and experiencing things. So I highly encourage people to flounder, fail, and fall down, because the more you do that, the more that you'll be able to wake up the next day and all will be good. Nothing is the end of the world, So I think I think just experiencing things, the more you do it, the more you'll be confident in these situations. And one trick that I like to give is what I call the steel suitcase moment. So in every movie, right, like usually spy movies, there's always like the good guy and the bad guy, and they're sort of talking to each other, and they've got that steel briefcase that's got like, you know, $1 million in it or whatever, or like the contract with a bar of gold. And you know that scene where like they close the suitcase, lock it, and then they walk off with the suitcase? That moment, you should never, ever be afraid to use that moment. So sometimes a client will be like, oh, how much do you charge for this type of thing? Or like, how many rounds of designs can we get out of this? Or, you know, like, is it okay if we have rights to this in perpetuity? Like they throw these things at you and you're like frazzled, right? You're like, oh shit, I don't know the answer right now, right? Don't say yes. Don't say no. Don't say, I don't know. Just be like, you know what? Let me get back to you on that. I will find out the answer. There's never anything wrong with that. But I feel like a lot of creatives, because they feel like, A, they're being judged on who they are personally. B, they feel like there's this competition, like maybe there's 20 other designers waiting outside to get the job. So they feel like they have to lock it down right there. Right. They feel like they have to just answer like, $20 an hour? Is that cool? Oh, no, too much. Okay, $15 an hour. Is that cool? You know, like in perpetuity. Yeah, you could have it in perpetuity. That's cool. You know, like they're just like giving away the farm. And so like never be afraid to be like, you know what? Let me get back to you on that one. Tomorrow morning, first thing, you'll have the answer. Yeah. You know, there's no one's ever, and you know, if a client is like, no, we can't accept that, fuck that. Like, you know what? They're like not going to be a client that you want to work with anyway. Every common sense, level-headed client will be like, yeah, totally makes sense. Get back to us on that, you know? So don't let that like sort of shake you. And also the other thing is, you know, I think because we're creators and what we are being paid and judged on is something that comes from our soul and our heart. It's very, very personal. Totally understand, right? But you have to put yourself in the other person's shoe. And to them, this is just a mathematical transaction. There's no ego involved in this for them. It is just math, right? And if you can say that to yourself, that like, this is nothing personal, there's no ego here. If you can't afford me, or if I am too expensive for you, this is just a question of math. It's not because you think I'm whack or you think someone else is better. You want to pay this much, I want to charge this much. This is just mathematical plus and minus. We just need to get to this level, you know, and that's it. Nothing personal. Art is personal, but you got to be able to separate those two things in your mind. And I've said this to many clients or prospective clients. I'll just be like, oh, that's your budget. You know, no offense taken. You know, it's way below what we would normally charge. I can recommend you some creatives that I think might do it for that rate, you know, but, you know, I'm not even going to, sometimes I'll say like, I'm not even going to ask you for more money because we're not even in the same universe. And it's just a question of math. You know, I'm kind of like sort of playing them at that point because I'm saying like their pockets are so small, but I'm also careful to not insult them. I'm just saying like, it's just math. Like we're not matching up on the math. Yeah. And I would also suggest, I play a lot of poker and I started poker after I started my business. And what I found was that playing poker in front of real people really is the best training you could possibly have in terms of people the whole game of poker is people putting you in uncomfortable situations and you putting people in uncomfortable situations, right? And how you deal with them. And the money side of poker is the barometer of truth, right? So like if I'm just asking you, hey, what do you think about this? And I'm just trusting your answer, it's just a conversation. But once you put even $1 down, I'm willing to bet $1 you're lying. Now it's like, oh shit, like you're making a judgment on my character now, you know, like, and poker's great for that because no matter how high or how low you play, like just that constant training of that negotiation and that psychological banter and being able to sit in a chair and have somebody question you on why you're doing what you're doing and call you out on it potentially, like, and to sit there and be cool, not sweating, just ice in your veins. There's no way to really recreate that in everyday life. And so that's why I love playing poker. So try your hand at poker. It has to be real poker. It can't be online poker because when online poker, you don't get that sort of like stress. You got to be playing even with friends, family members. It's awesome.
So two things are going to happen tomorrow. Everyone is going to up their IG game. Everyone's going to go live, and everyone's going to learn how to play poker.
Yep, yep.
That's awesome. No, I mean, I can totally relate. I think even, when you're in a meeting with potential clients, or even when you're in a meeting with a potential employer and you're being interviewed, you do feel cornered because you're like, hey, this is the small window that I have, and you start saying yes to everything. But I think the way that you phrase it is perfect, because it actually, I hope that clients respect you for doing that. There's a level of maturity for you to say, hey, like, I don't have the answer now. I'll come back and I'll follow up with you. So I hope that clients do respect, designers for really, responding in that manner. I think that's very effective.
Yeah, I think, you know what, to be honest, I think a lot of this has to do with the way they taught you stuff in design school. There's this feeling, I'm just sort of piggybacking on what you're saying. There's this feeling that when you're either in a job interview or a client review, right, that, you're sort of the slave and they're sort of like the overseer, right? And like, there's this very like high-low mentality. But I think the way creatives need to start looking at it is like, there's actually like a relationship. It's almost like more like dating, and you have to be like, yeah, I might go on this date with you. You might want to go on this date with me, but like, we have to both see eye to eye before we proceed, So I'm not just here to say yes to everything you want and hopefully you choose me. I think that's a lot of the way creatives go about it, because they're applying for a job. There's 100 creators applying. And so they think like, what can I do to make him choose me? But you have to more so think about it like dating, where it's like, what can I do to ensure that we are a good mutual match for each other? And if it's not, no big deal. It's probably better that we walk away now, and let someone who is a good match for this client take it, because it's not a good match for me. I think when you go into a meeting with that sort of attitude, and I'm not saying be a dick or be cocky, but like, just be like, all right, here's what I offer. What do you offer? Right. What do you bring to the table? And I think that's like a really good sort of thinking that I always use. I have this thing that I use where I actually learned it from a friend of mine in London named Mai, so I'll give her credit for it, Mai Ukazawa. She said there's 3 F's when you are talking about like work and design work. The 3 F's are fun, finance, and folio, right? And you should, in order to like take good work, it should check off 2 of those F's. 2 of those 3 F's have to be checked in order for it to be a good job. So fun, is it an awesome, fun project? Do you love the brand? Do you love the client? Are you just passionate about it? Finance, is it good paying, right? And folio, will it look great in your book? Will it look great in your overall career? Is it like a trajectory that you want to go on? And if you think about every job that you've ever taken, it checks off anywhere between 1 to 3 of those F's. And I've taken jobs where it only checked off 1 F, right? So I'll give you an example. Like, let's just do it for fun. It's only for fun, right? Like, oh, my friend's getting married and he wants me to design the invitation. Oh, that's fun. Let's do that. Eventually, those are like, oh, this guy's a pain in my ass. Like, why am I doing this, right? Because only 1 F was checked. And then like, you do another job and it's like, yo, the check is crazy. Like, but the client sucks. The brand sucks. Like, I wouldn't even put this on my portfolio. It's like embarrassing, but the check is crazy. Those jobs always end up being like the most headache inducing. And even by the time you get that big check, you're just like, ugh, I would never do this again. Like, take the money back. You know what I mean? And then, yeah, like, when you do jobs that are just for the book and like are bad with money and like not fun, those are also not good. So you need two of the 3 in order to make it like a good project.
Wow, that's actually a really good equation, because as you were talking to us about this, I've experienced all 3. I think everyone in this chat can say that they've designed something for a family member, a wedding invitation that has turned into a 6-month project with revisions and things like that. And you're doing it because they're related to you. So that's interesting. I'm going to start to integrate some of these questions into our conversation. One of the questions that was asked by Dominic Matante to the end of being competent in finances, what is your advice for those who want to start their own businesses? How much money do you need to begin?
Okay. Really good question. I think if you're going to start like a creative business, like a studio, basically like a design business, Not much, to be honest. You know, like you need, let me think. I mean, you need base money for like a laptop and the apps, an email account, a website, which, not for nothing, like getting that set up is probably like 5 grand, right? To get maybe even more now. But like, yeah, a decent laptop, the apps, a website, and emails, somewhere around 5 grand. You kind of, I would say, need those to be like, um, at a somewhat professional level. I know there's like hustlers out there that like can borrow a friend's laptop, go to like Kinko's every time they need to use a computer, like there's ways around it if you don't have the means for the 5 grand, but like really that's all you need. We mentioned this before about like, setting yourself up as a business. If you're a sole proprietor, which means you don't have a business, meaning, your name's Dominic, right? Like, yeah, I'm just going to write a check to you, Dominic. You can start out that way for the time being. There are advantages to setting up a company, which costs another couple of $1,000s to set up. But there are sort of pluses to setting up a business. You can write stuff off, like if you work out of your apartment, you can write like, I think 30 to 40% of your rent off as a business expense. And so you pay less taxes, but to start a creative agency, no, it's really not that much. That's the best part about creative agencies. It's just, people are paying for your time, so you in your head have like an hourly rate that you go by. But really, if you work 100 hours a week on the project, like that's just your time that you're working on. So once the client pays you, you don't have to like pay out other people unless you start growing and you have employees and stuff like that. But in the beginning, it's just like as much as you want to work is as much as you want to make. You know what I mean? Like you eat what you kill, and so in the beginning, I was like just grinding and like working every possible way, getting every possible job, just to keep the money coming in. And it really helped me to grow my business to where it is today. Now our clothing line, Staple, like the Pigeon clothing line, it has like 15 people. And then the design studio, Staple Design, is a whole separate company. And that has like a dozen people. So altogether, there's like 30 people that work under me.
Yeah, absolutely. We have another question here by Andrew Hodson. He wants to know, would you call yourself a risk taker? And if yes, what pushes you to continue to take risks?
I am absolutely a risk taker. Poker helped out with that as well. So another nod to poker, because you're just betting, especially if you play no limit where you can just bet all of your money. I'm definitely a risk taker. Like a couple of things happened to me when I was like about 10 years ago, where like I was really close to losing my life a couple times. It's a long story, but essentially, if you have an experience where you have a near-death like experience and you are close to losing your life, or if someone in your like very immediate family also loses their lives, you sort of understand how precious life is and how essentially insignificant we are. Like we're just carbon-based organisms that like just like this, I could just die like right now, you know what I mean? And so if you think of it that way, like over planning and over worrying and overthinking about like non-essential shit is like everything essentially is non-essential. Basically, like when you talk about like negotiation or prices or whether you want to do a job or not, like I'm more laissez-faire and carefree about it. Like here's one example that comes to mind. Back in the day, like I used to have this store called Read Space, right? And before I had that store, I had an office for the design studio. And the rent that I was paying for that old office was $2,000 a month. And then I wanted to move into this new space. And the new space included enough room to have a retail store, which was going to be Read Space, and the design studio. But the new rent was going to be $8,000. So that's a 4x increase, right? I thought about it for like 10 minutes. And I was like, let's go, let's sign it. Like, fuck it. Like what could happen? Like, it's like, I can't pay the rent. I got to vacate. Somebody sues me, yada, yada, yada. Like, it is what it is. Like a year ago, I almost like lost my life. You know what I mean? So like, I'm not like aggressively sickly, like sort of like a gambler, but I do understand that life is short. You have to sort of be aggressive if you want to make moves. And I don't want to be caught asking like, what if I had done that? You know, I never want to have that regret. So I am pretty risk averse.
Well, it's not scary unless it's fun, right?
Yeah, you know, now in the beginning it's scary, but after you do it a few times, you actually realize that if you're not scared, there's something wrong. Like it's too easy. You know, you almost need that fear to be like, oh wow, this is a big step. Like I'm making a big advancement here. But you know, just don't you know, not I realize not everyone's mentally made the same way. Some people really get affected by stress, and you know, protect yourself. Like take care of yourself. If you are very mentally fragile and like you don't perform well under stress, then yeah, don't do that shit. But like your brain and your soul is like a sword, in my opinion. Like it can get honed and sharpened, and you know, the more you like beat at it and get experience and win and lose and draw, like the sharper your blade gets, and eventually you get to the point where you're just like, you know, nothing really phases you. You know, like I haven't had anything really. I've had a lot of very stressful things happen, that like my wife looks at and she's just like, I don't know how you're functioning right now. Like she's like, this is stressing me out watching you go through this, and I'm not even like really affected by it. She's like, I don't know how you're surviving. I'm just like, yeah, well, it is what it is.
You're just walking around with Kevlar. Nothing can touch you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's another question by Wang, who is a designer out of the Bay Area. He wants to know that you do really great introductions and guest profiles on your podcast, The Business of Hype. How do you prepare for these interviews leading up to the show?
Thanks for listening. The Business of Hype is really like the classes that I wish existed when I was in school, you know, and all those questions that like everyone's afraid to ask, you know, I asked them, you know, and like, you know, and you know, these questions, and everyone has the same questions. Like when you're out with your friends and you're shooting the shit and drinking a beer and you're talking about your work, everyone wants to be like, yo, how much did you charge them? Do they have a problem paying you too? You know, like, like no one talks about that shit. And it's like, I wanted to have this show where I talked about it. In terms of preparation, I don't prepare at all. Like sometimes on my Uber on the way to the interview, I'll start thinking of some questions like in the 15 minutes beforehand. But I don't do any questioning. I really vet the guests first of all. Like they have to be guests that like I really, you know, vibe with and respect. A lot of the guests are people that I've known for a while. Some of them are people that I don't know. But you know, like I really just make it a conversation, and really the vibe of the show is almost like the how do I say it? Like it's like, you know, when you're at the airport and you're like at the lounge or like at the bar waiting for your flight, and like you start having that conversation with the guy next to you on the plane or at the airport, like that type of a conversation. I just want to have almost like a confessional, you know, like just what do you do? Oh yeah, what? Oh okay. And it's like, oh, you do that? Oh okay, let's shoot the shit, you know, and like we could just step away and there's like no harm, no foul. And I think because there's this like sort of mutual respect between one another, they really air out like their laundry to me. Like so many of my guests after the show, like after the airing, they're like, that was better than my therapist, man. That was awesome, you know? So that's really a great compliment. And yeah, I'm glad you guys tune in and like it.
Yeah, I mean that's great. I think it does require a level of you interviewing people in order to get to that state. For me, you know, we have this other initiative called Context with Advanced Design, which is also a podcast, and a lot of the people that we interview, and even here with Lens, having you on, even whether I know you or not, it takes me a great while for me to be in a state where I'm able to have this conversation with you. But if I turn off my camera right now, I would totally freak out because I'm talking to Jeff, right? So it's really awesome that you're able to be at that level. And it's also awesome that they're able to just be honest with you. And, you know, sometimes the people who listen to your podcast, this is the stuff we want to hear. This is like the good stuff. This is the, you know, this is the like you said, the stuff that you don't learn in school.
Yep. And one of my favorite things about the show is that like I talk to all different professions, you know, so like so far this season, like I've talked to Daniel Arsham, who's like an amazing artist. I've talked to Ronnie Chang, who's like a comedian. He has a Netflix special. So like it's really interesting to see the common through lines between like, Asa Akira, who's like
Mhm.
an award-winning porn star, Daniel Arsham, and Ronnie Chang. Like, what do they have in common? And they do have surprisingly a lot in common. And trying to like connect those threads is one of my greatest joys of doing the show.
Yeah, fantastic. Here's this is a really good question, and I'm happy that this question was brought up. Does your culture and ethnicity play into your design work, and if so, how?
Ah, yeah, this is a very timely question. It is Asian Pacific Heritage Month, so shout out to all us Asians out there. Um, I would say, being Asian is everything for me, right? It affects my whole soul and DNA. It can't not be that way. But I don't really let it influence the visual output of my work. So what I deliberately try to do is create work that is just good for being good. Like, I don't want to be the best Asian designer, like I don't want you to look at my work and be like, wow, that's a great Chinese designer who did that. And there are artists that you look at that you're like, wow, he really infuses his heritage into his work. I deliberately don't want to do that. I want to be global and racially agnostic. Now, the the things that I went through in terms of race as I grew up have a huge effect on me and my personality and who I am today. And that, of course, infuses into the work. I grew up in New Jersey. I was born in Jersey, like Middle Jersey, in a Monmouth County area called Freehold, which is very, very predominantly Caucasian. I mentioned before I had like 1,600 kids in my high school. 1,600 kids. There was only three Asians out of 1,600, right? So from the age of 1 to 18, racism, like racial slurs, was an everyday thing for me. Like, it wasn't even racism to me because it was happening every day since birth. It was like normal to be called names and ridiculed every single day. It wasn't until I went to NYU where I realized that, like, oh, people don't ridicule you every day, because NYU was like 60% Asian, right? And so
Mhm.
that was really one of the biggest benefits of going to NYU, was learning about me and my identity and being proud of who I am. But from 0 to 18, I was literally embarrassed to be Asian and Chinese. I didn't want friends to come over. I didn't want to bring my lunch to school because it smelled weird. I didn't want people to see like the Buddha statue that was in my entranceway and how my parents had to bow to it. I was embarrassed of all that shit. And it's only after I went to New York that I became sort of like really proud of it. But that sort of like underdog chip on my shoulder still exists today. Like, you don't get rid of that shit, especially when it's built in from like infancy all the way to your teenage years. So it's definitely a part of it. But my goal is really to become like, one of the most important creatives of our time, and by default raising up the status of Asians and Chinese, but not make that like the initial calling card. It's kind of hard to articulate, but like that's what I'm trying to do. I want people to basically love the shit that I put out, do research on me, and have some kid in like South Africa or like Atlanta be like, oh shit, he's Chinese. Like, I can't believe that. Like, I didn't think Chinese could design like that. Like, that to me is the win, not like, here's my Chinese born design, buy it. Like, I don't think that's how you win.
Absolutely. You've been involved with so many initiatives. In your opinion, what defines a great leader?
Um, to me, a great leader is really having the ability to work with the people that you're bringing up, like the next generation, the people that you're supposed to help, and being super genuinely happy when they surpass you. Like, everyone that you work with, your goal should be that they become better than you are. And it's not something that you could really fake the funk with. A lot of people have this defensive mechanism, i.e. the ego, where it's like, yo, you work for me, you can't like surpass me. Like, you're Pippin. Like, you can never be the
Right.
GOAT. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
but you have to want Pippin to be the GOAT. And there's not a lot of people like that. And MJ wasn't that. You know what I mean? MJ was like, you're Pippin, be Pippin. So I think that makes a great leader. One of the things, it is easily hands down the thing that I am most proud of, is when people who have worked for me, who don't work for me anymore, like, we still are homies and we break bread and we work together. Because I know a lot of employers who, after the employee leaves, it's like practically beef. It's
Right.
like, we don't talk, fuck him, fuck her, like, fuck that, you know, like, but we, like, a lot of my ex-employees, we collaborate, we work together, we break bread, and it's awesome. And like, it's great, like, to hear sometimes they say, like, I really miss working for Staple. I wish one day we could get back and work together. Like, that just shows that when we were working together intimately, there was a real genuine bond there, that there's like a mutual respect. And you know, somebody brought up, like, you know, how, like, all the different projects that I do. You know, I'm only one man. There's only, you know, so many hours in the week. You can only stay awake, you know, for so many hours. You need some form of sleep. So like, no matter how hard I work, I'm only as good as the team that's around me and the people that are supporting me. Otherwise, I could only really do, like, you know, 4 or 5 things. Like, you can't do like 20 things. Like, if you just look at like our Instagram this week, like, we're dropping so many things, and it's like, it's all because of the collective team that is able to like support me in that.
Absolutely. And yeah, I wouldn't mind us using metaphors for The Last Dance. I'm down to talk about The Last Dance.
I'm not caught up though. I haven't seen the last episode,
All right.
so
Well,
don't.
I won't ruin it for you, but I think they win the championship at the end. But let's move over to, you know, this is fantastic. We talked a little bit about, you know, finances and the importance of that. We talked about leadership. I want to talk a little bit more about failure and your definition of failure, because you do talk a little bit about how it's important. It's an important part of the process,
Mhm.
failing and starting over and overcoming. I would love to hear your definition of failure.
It's real easy for me. Failure is when you try to please everyone. That's it. It's so simple. It's like, unfortunately, and this is particularly true in design and creativity, democracy doesn't really work. Someone needs to say, this is the way it's got to be done. Like, because it's subjective, right?
Yeah.
If you have blue, red, and green, and you're like, let's take a vote. Who, like, no, there's no fucking vote. Like, I'm the creative. I want red. Like, yeah, I get that your daughter wants green, but like, who? What is she? Like, who does she?
Yeah.
What does she know? You know, like, and so like, you can't please everybody. Like, someone's gonna get hurt, and you just have to accept that like, you're not gonna please everyone. I think that there's a famous quote, where the quote goes like, I don't know what the secret to success is, but I do know what the secret to failure is, and it's trying to please everybody. Like, you just can't go, like, there's so many people, even when you're individually working on your by yourself as a freelancer. Think about like your parents, your landlord, your boyfriend, girlfriend, your partner, like, you know, your intern. There's already so many people you got to please, and like, if you just try to make everyone else happy and you yourself are not happy, you are destined for failure. I firmly believe that you don't have the ability, humans don't have the ability to make other people happy if they themselves are not happy. And it sounds selfish to say, I'm going to make myself happy first. That sounds, society has said that that is a very selfish statement, but I think it's actually self-care to say, I'm going to make myself happy first, then I can help you. It's like that analogy where like, you know, when you're on the plane and then the mask falls down, you have to put your mask on first before you put it, even on your own kid. Because if you try to put on your kid and then you pass out, your kid's dead too. So you have to take care of yourself first, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's very important, especially when you work in a team environment where especially with if your team is filled with people that you care. I think it's important to know that, hey, if we're working in a team environment right now, it's all business and this is not personal. And someone has to say we got to go with red or we got to go with green, as
Yep.
opposed to, hey, let's get a consensus and everyone's happy, and that's just not going to work out.
Right. And I think, to preface that example that you just said, before that, the coach, you know, using sports analogies, has to say, listen, we love everyone here. Everyone is mutually respectful of each other. But let's not dilly dally, and like, let's not sugarcoat shit. If you presented red and I presented blue and I say, we're going blue, there's no disrespect, because next time it'll be red.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's fine. Like, it's just, we just have to make a decision and move forward, you know? But like, I know a lot of times, because creatives, again, are sort of putting out their personal work and it's very personal to them. When I say we're not going red, like, feelings are hurt, and I'm not hurting feelings. And some people they're bad at delivering the news. So some people are like, yo, red is the ugliest thing I've ever seen in my life. Like, okay, you can't say it that way. But on the flip side, there's some people that take things way too personally. Like, how dare you not like red? Like, what?
Mm-hmm.
It's fine. It's just work. It's just, that's it. You know, we're not judging the Mona Lisa versus David here. Like, it's just like, is Helvetica better or is Helvetica thin better? Like, what is, you know, it's just, it is what it is, you know? So yeah, just in any design environment, I would say leave your ego at the door. We're just here to work. We're just here to win. And just make sure that the people you do work for have that respect for you. Like, they're not, you know, I'm not saying work for someone who like suns you and disrespects you all day long, but like understand that the greater mission is like to get the job done in the best way possible. And sometimes that's going to mean that everything you do isn't going to come to fruition.
Absolutely. You have this drive, this entrepreneurial spirit. Do you think that you get that from your parents, you know, migrating here, you being a first generation? Do you, I mean, that's
Yep.
it.
Probably, probably a lot. I mean, they had their own business, albeit a warehouse, but like they didn't work for quote unquote the man. And I've never had a job. You know, I started Staple out of Parsons School of Design, and so I've never had like a full-time 40-hour week clock in clock out job. And I know that I'm definitely blessed to be able to experience that. On the other hand, I'm also very cognizant that, you know, the people that work for me, they have had jobs. So they, for example, like it's important to them how much personal time off they get and how many, you know, holidays they generate, and, you know, like
Right.
what the expense report is and when they get reimbursed, like these things. And like, I always have to remind myself that, oh yeah, not everyone founded their own company and would literally like take a bullet for their brand. Like I would take a bullet for Staple. And these people that work for me, while I, you know, I love every one of them and like they're very supportive, I have to understand that they have a life and they want to go home and watch Game of Thrones and be with their wife and like, you know, see their kid, you know what I mean? Like I have to understand that. So that's sort of like the reminder that I always have to give to myself, is to just be an understanding entrepreneur. And I'm not saying entrepreneurialism, this is one thing I always preach on the show, and it's always on my podcast. And it's also the reason why I don't always interview just entrepreneurs. I also interview people who have worked at companies for like 20, 30 years, because there's something super respectable and admirable about somebody who supports a vision. Not everyone, has like some sort of grandiose vision that they want to execute on, and B, not everyone wants to like risk everything in order to see that vision come true. Like other people have other priorities, you know, and other circumstances. And sometimes somebody who's really good just wants to be a supporting member to a vision. And that's the beauty of business, is that there are these different puzzle pieces. And when you sort of lock them all together, you have a really beautiful picture. And so what I would say is like, one thing that you guys should sort of identify about yourself is really look in the mirror and say like, do I really want to have my own business? Like, do I really want to sacrifice? It's not a like having your own business is not a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday thing. It's like Christmas Eve, Sunday, midnight. If something needs to be done, you're doing it. And if you're not doing it, no one's doing it. If you don't want that life, which is completely understandable, don't be an entrepreneur, because you will probably lose. You know, now if these things are like important to you, like I want to have a family, I want to be able to like tuck them in at night, I want to take care of my parents and my grandparents and see them, I want to travel the world and like see everything. Or like, for example, if like I'm really into nature and I want to make sure like I get 8 hours of surfing in every week, everyone has their own priority, and you just have to make sure that your priority fits into the lifestyle that you want to live, you know. So it's important that you identify that about yourself, like before you get in too deep.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're gonna start to kind of wrap things up here. I have a couple more questions to ask you. One of them is about the current state that we're in right now. This working from home COVID situation. How do you think that affects design or students that are just graduating? Do you have any advice for them how they should start to, um, you know, be efficient and prepare for when we do go back to, you know, this new reality?
Yeah. You know, you could look at everything two-sided, right? Like you could look at it as this is the most devastating time of our whole entire history, and like all shit's hitting the fan. And it's so hard to answer this question because everyone individually is going through this their own way. Like I have friends that 5 of their family members have COVID and like they're trying to struggle through it. On the other hand, I have friends that like they don't know a single human that has COVID and they think it's fake. You know what I mean? Like, so you have these very disparaging sort of like views. And then you have some people that have lost their job, have been furloughed or laid off. They don't know how they're going to pay rent, and then you've got other people who are like, doing quite well and they're sort of benefiting from like, whether they're in the e-com business or something that has to do with like, delivery or some business that is really excelling now. So there's the haves and the have-nots are sort of being like very evident right now. And I would say that if you're sort of on the fence, this is an incredible time to really reassess and figure out what you want to do and really like, I don't know if you guys watch that movie, like The Matrix, but like this is the time to like unplug out of the Matrix because the whole world is unplugged right now. You know what I mean? Like nothing is really happening. Like the entire world activity has gone down. So this is a great time to be like, what is it that I really, really want to do? Do I really want to do this or that? And how can I go about it? Like if I want to learn a new skill and before you couldn't learn that new skill because you were always hustling and grinding, like now is the time to do that, So there's a lot of benefit. I also think really smart people want to invest. And when I say invest, I don't necessarily only mean money, but like they want to support and invest ideas. Like smart people know that this is the time where like revolutionary ideas are formed. So if you have a revolutionary idea, or if you think you've got like the next incredible thing, now is the time to formulate it, right? Like when you go back to like, when everyone plugs back into the matrix and everyone starts their 9-to-5 grind and rat race bullshit, you're not gonna have time to like put together your idea deck and your vision board. And like, you're just gonna be back in the matrix, Now is the time that you can really put that vision together and actually like, the other great thing is that now people that you could never reach before, they're probably just at home, like not doing much, So like you could have meetings, Zoom calls, like you could actually get access to people that probably would be too busy before that, So look for those silver linings, it's really a tough time. We're going to face a lot of problems, but this is a good test to see like who's a survivor out of this.
This is also a good test to see who's a real human out of this, because with everyone working from home, I've experienced a surge of phone calls and people reaching out and having genuine, talks with people like, hey, are you doing okay? And there's that human aspect that we usually take for granted because we're moving so fast.
Yeah, totally.
So I'm going to wrap things up with this one question. As successful as you are, and all the experience that you've gained in the last decade or so with your brand and working for yourself, do you still feel any pressure? Do you still experience any twitching or any failures? Do you still feel these things or butterflies that you got like when you first started?
I still feel butterflies. So there's 2 parts to that. One is my team, right? So like everyone who works for me and who executes for me, I feel a little bit less intimidation when it comes to like managing people, because what I've done is by building this sort of like vision and this brand for the last 23 years, when someone is considering working for Staple, there should be no surprise at this point of what they're signing up for. Like we're not like a startup brand where it's like, oh, I don't know what they do or I don't know what they're like. Like we wear our heart on our sleeves. So like if you're going to come work for Staple, you should know what you're signing up for. And like I have no qualms in telling somebody it's not working out. Like I'm sorry, so I don't have any trepidation there. But I still do have the butterflies whenever I release something out into the world, and it's really funny because people think that like every time we release something, it sells out, and they're like, "Why didn't you make more?" Like even this Zoom class, right? You can attest to this. Yeah. We released it, and they're like, "Why do you do that? Why is the Zoom class sold out? Why would you do that, Jeff?" I'm like, I don't know how many people will want to watch this. So we immediately called you. We're like, can you open up more seats, please? And whenever I release a product, it's like, we recently did this collaboration with Shake Shack, and it sold out. we launched it at 1 p.m. and at 1 p.m. I started to write like the post, like, oh, it's on sale now. While I'm writing the post, my e-com guy calls me. He's like, we're sold out. It's 3 minutes and it was all gone. And I didn't even post it yet. And he was like, why didn't you make like triple the amount or quad? I was like, I don't have a genie bottle. I can't say, if I had made 5X, you'd be calling me right now saying like, hey, should we put these on sale? They're not selling. So like, how am I supposed to know the exact number, right? So there is still this trepidation of like, I hope that the public and the fans and the people who are watching what I do, I hope they enjoy and appreciate the work that I put into it. But I never take it for granted. And I feel like a lot of brands, particularly in streetwear and sneaker culture, are sort of taking advantage of their fans. Like they're just sort of like, it's done. Like, just buy it. Like I never sort of take it for granted that you're just going to support and buy the thing that I do. I still to this day feel like that has to be earned, that respect. And honestly, to this day, whenever, 23 years in, when I see somebody on the street wearing Staple, I'm like flabbergasted, mind blown that there's somebody I don't know wearing my brand at like paid money for. I'm like, oh, wow, you're wearing Staple, and like, they're just like, whatever, like they don't even know who I am, but I still get really excited. And I love that I still have that really deep passion for what I create, people who like appreciate it and support it. And I'm really, really, again, respectful for people who like support the vision.
Full circle.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much for being on our session of Lens with Advanced Design. I really appreciate your time. I think your insights are extremely valuable. I hope everyone learned a lot from the things that you had to say. I feel like everyone that we've interviewed that's at your level of, designer, X amount of experience and has failed and come back and they were back at it. Everyone here has a very common denominator. You guys all talk about leadership. You guys all talk about how, it's 10% design and the rest is just hustle and networking and working your butt off. So I really appreciate your time, and thank you everyone for being a part of Lens. We'll make this session public as soon as, in the coming days. So have a fantastic Thursday.
Yeah, and if I didn't get to your question, like hit me on Twitter or Instagram. I'm at Jeff Staple. I'll try to get it answered there.
Absolutely. And when we make this public, we'll, add all of your Instagram and social media links. So really appreciate your time. Thanks, Jeff.
All right. Thanks a lot. Bye,
Take care.
guys. Take care.